Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you once thought made you happy has quietly become your prison. Not a prison of steel bars or concrete walls, but something far more insidious. A velvet cage lined with dopamine, novelty, and curated gratification. You open your phone, a quick laugh from a meme, a hit of envy from someone else's perfect life, a comforting distraction from a video algorithmically crafted just for you. You don't even notice the chains. Why would you? They're made of pleasure. You sip your favorite coffee, sweetened just right. Outside, people pass by with earbuds in, locked into playlists, podcasts, affirmations, each seeking to engineer their mood to manufacture a sense of control over the chaos of existence. We live in a world where boredom is a crisis, silence is an enemy, and stillness feels like suffocation. Everything is gamified, commodified, optimized for pleasure. But then the question hits you. What if pleasure isn't freedom at all? What if it's the most effective form of enslavement ever invented? Not by tyrants or oligarchs, not by gods or devils, but by ourselves. There's a paradox we've ignored for too long. The more we chase pleasure, the emptier we seem to become. The more we seek comfort, the more fragile we feel. We've built societies where convenience is the currency of happiness, and yet depression, anxiety, and meaninglessness are epidemic. Why? Because we were taught to fear suffering more than we feared mediocrity, to pursue happiness, not meaning, to indulge, not awaken. But who gave us this script? Aldous Huxley did not predict a dystopia of violence, war, and authoritarian brutality. That was Orwell's nightmare. No, Huxley saw something much more terrifying. A society sedated by pleasure, pacified by entertainment, and enslaved by its own desire for comfort. What Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared were those who would not need to ban them because no one would want to read them. In Brave New World, truth doesn't need to be suppressed because no one cares enough to seek it. People are drowned in distractions. They take their soma, a drug that numbs suffering and ensures compliance, not through force, but through contentment. And here's the bitter truth. Soma already exists. It's not in a pill bottle. It's in your feed, your food, your fantasies. It's in the subtle seduction of always being entertained, always stimulated, always distracted. It's in the normalization of scrolling past human tragedy as you search for the next dopamine spike. It's in the way we avoid eye contact with reality because it makes us uncomfortable. Do you see it now? Pleasure is no longer the reward, it's the leash. You were conditioned to think the enemy was pain, but what if the true enemy was comfort without depth, joy without connection, stimulation without substance? This isn't a call to reject pleasure, it's a call to recognize its shadow, because behind every artificial high is a low we haven't dared to face, and the longer we avoid it, the more our sense of self withers beneath the surface. Do you ever wonder why your achievements feel hollow just days after reaching them? Why the video that made you laugh 10 minutes ago now leaves you empty? Why the things you thought you wanted so badly become meaningless the moment you possess them? It's not because you're broken. It's because you've been trained to consume experiences instead of living them, to seek stimulation over growth, to feel good rather than become whole. And now, here's the great question, the one that won't let you sleep once it lands. What if pleasure is the new form of slavery, and you're both the master and the captive? Let that sink in. Because from here, the rabbit hole only gets deeper. We're about to uncover why this seduction exists, where it began, and how it shapes the very architecture of your thoughts. But to see clearly, you must be willing to question everything you've called normal. Because normal has become pathological. Let's go further, but don't expect comfort. Expect confrontation. Because the real horror isn't what pleasure has given you, it's what it has taken away. The most effective chains are the ones you choose to wear. You were never forced into this pursuit of pleasure. No one held a gun to your head and demanded you binge watch, swipe endlessly, chase dopamine through sugar, sex, screens, or synthetic self-improvement. You did it willingly. You chose the path. But what if you were never really given a choice? Let's rewind. Not to your childhood, but to something deeper. Your evolutionary wiring. Your brain was sculpted not for truth or transcendence, but for survival. Millions of years ago, in the savannas and forests, pleasure signaled one thing: life. Sweetness meant ripe fruit. Warmth meant safety. Sex meant reproduction. Novelty meant learning, adaptation. Pain, on the other hand, was a warning, something to avoid, something that meant injury, illness, or exile. Now take that primal machinery and drop it into a civilization that no longer needs survival instincts, but is still governed by them. That's the paradox. The same reward circuits designed to keep you alive are now used to keep you complacent. Corporations, algorithms, political systems, they all hijack this neurological vulnerability. They don't just feed your desires, they manufacture them. Psychologist B.F. Skinner once discovered that intermittent rewards, those given randomly, create stronger conditioning than consistent ones. Rats press a lever longer when they don't know when the reward is coming. Sound familiar? That's your social media feed. That's your gambling app. That's your endless scroll. Every like, every ping, every notification, drip-fed unpredictably to keep you hooked. But this isn't just psychological, it's philosophical. Friedrich Nietzsche warned us, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But remove the why, and you're left with a fragile creature, seeking only momentary highs, forever afraid of the void that emerges in silence. Without meaning, pleasure becomes the only metric of value, and when pleasure becomes the highest good, pain becomes the ultimate evil, something to escape at all costs. Enter Aldous Huxley. Unlike Orwell, who feared repression through fear, Huxley feared oppression through indulgence. He saw a future where people wouldn't fight tyranny because they were too comfortable to care. In Brave New World, society is controlled not by whips and chains but by engineered bliss. Everyone is happy. Everyone is entertained. Conflict is suppressed not through violence but through sedation. Religion, replaced by consumer rituals. Art, stripped of soul and made palatable. Love, replaced by recreational sex. Truth, fragmented, irrelevant. And yet no one revolts. Why would they? They're happy. That's the horror. The masses don't rise up when enslaved by pain. They submit when enslaved by pleasure. Modern society has become Huxley's prophecy, with sharper graphics and faster Wi-Fi. Entertainment is omnipresent. Pornography is one click away. Food is hyper-processed to maximize craving. Dopamine is the new god and its temples are everywhere. You don't worship at altars. You worship at screens. Even your suffering has become commodified. Stress? There's an app for that. Loneliness? Here's a virtual friend. Existential dread? Numb it with curated mindfulness videos or chemical cocktails. The system doesn't care if you're dying inside, as long as you stay sedated on the outside. And here's the insidious part. You've been taught that this is freedom. Freedom to choose your brand, freedom to indulge, freedom to optimize your identity through filters, to manifest your desires, to build a perfectly marketable self. But none of it touches the soul. Because the soul doesn't thrive on pleasure, it thrives on depth. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress, deny, or disown. But in this age of pleasure, the shadow isn't just hidden, it's buried beneath layers of superficial gratification. Every unhealed wound is glossed over with another shot of serotonin, and as a result, we become strangers to our own darkness, forever running from discomfort, and in doing so, running from truth. But there is no growth without discomfort, no transformation without descent. The hero's journey always begins with a fall into the unknown, not an ascent into comfort. So what happens when a society systematically avoids that descent? It stagnates, it decays, it forgets how to suffer with purpose, it forgets how to endure, how to strive, how to live with pain instead of against it. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps, wrote, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure." Now, ask yourself, when was the last time you did something meaningful that also hurt? When was the last time you allowed yourself to sit in silence long enough to feel the weight of your own emptiness? You weren't meant to be comfortable all the time. You were meant to become whole, and wholeness requires contrast. It requires suffering, grief, longing, yearning. These are not signs of failure. They are the initiation rites of the soul. But instead, we numb. We avoid. We chase shadows on walls and call it enlightenment. We've been trained to see pleasure as the solution, but it's often the mask that hides the deeper problem. That we no longer know how to feel alive without stimulation. And behind that lies an even deeper fear that if we were to strip away all the pleasures, we might discover there's nothing underneath. Or worse, that the person underneath is unworthy, unformed, unfulfilled. But this is the lie. Because your pain does not make you broken, your emptiness is not a flaw, it's an invitation. And the moment you accept that invitation, you begin to see the world not as a machine designed to entertain you, but as a crucible designed to awaken you. But before we can rise, we must see how far we've already fallen. Because the consequences of our addiction to pleasure are not just internal, they are cultural, societal, existential, and they're happening now. Let's go deeper. You don't notice a prison when it's built in increments. You don't resist a leash when it feels like a luxury. And you don't scream when the world burns quietly beneath a blanket of comfort. This is how the architecture of modern slavery is hidden, not through force, but through the illusion of choice. The pursuit of pleasure, once a gift, has become the scaffolding of our collapse, and most terrifyingly, we celebrate it. We have traded the sword of truth for the spoon of convenience. And the consequences? They are everywhere. But like carbon monoxide, they are silent, invisible, and slowly suffocating. Start with the individual. The human psyche was not designed to process infinite novelty. Your ancestors stared at the same horizon for decades, worked the same fields, knew the same people. Now, in the span of a minute, you are exposed to war, sex, beauty, tragedy, humor, and despair, each packaged in 10-second clips, each demanding an emotional response. But your nervous system can't keep up, so it shuts down. We call it numbness, apathy, dissociation. But it's not a bug, it's a feature. It's your mind's last defense against drowning in meaninglessness. You were not meant to live 1,000 lifetimes in a day. And yet we scroll as if motion will make the emptiness go away. It doesn't. It buries it deeper. Depression is no longer a clinical term. It is the air we breathe. Anxiety is not an illness. It is the symptom of a mind forced to pretend it's free while being shackled by invisible expectations. Do more, achieve more, feel more, consume more. But never stop, never be still, never look too closely. Because if you did, you might see it. The subtle slavery, the hollowing out. It's in the mother who posts curated moments of joy while secretly fearing she's unlovable without validation. It's in the man who works tirelessly to afford pleasures he no longer even enjoys. It's in the teenager who performs authenticity for strangers online while drowning in existential doubt offline. It's in you every time you can't sit still without reaching for a screen. This isn't freedom, it's sedation. And the world reflects it, the culture mirrors it. Art, once a medium of transcendence, has become a product of algorithms. Music is crafted for virality, not vulnerability. Films are designed for escapism, not exploration. Literature, when it's read at all, is skimmed for quotes, not digested for truth. The soul has been outsourced to aesthetics. The depth we once found in silence, we now expect from noise. And here lies another terrifying consequence. We've lost the capacity for boredom. Boredom used to be the womb of creation. From boredom came reflection, innovation, imagination. But now, boredom is treated like a disease, something to be cured with distractions. But what if boredom was never the enemy? What if boredom was the doorway? And what if pleasure, constant, shallow pleasure, was the lock that keeps it sealed? The culture doesn't just fear stillness. It profits from your inability to be still. Every platform is designed to hijack your attention. Every advertisement manipulates your sense of lack. Every notification trains your brain to seek stimulus, not stillness. It is the psychological equivalent of intravenous sugar, sweet, addictive, and lethal in excess. And this isn't just a mental health crisis, it's a moral and spiritual one. Because what happens to a generation that no longer finds meaning in suffering? What happens to a society that believes every form of discomfort is pathology? You get a culture of avoidance, of simulated progress, of people who can no longer distinguish between feeling good and being good. And this is precisely what Huxley feared. In Brave New World, no one reads Shakespeare because Shakespeare makes you feel things, grief, longing, tragedy. But in a pleasure-driven world, those emotions are threats. They disrupt the dopamine cycle. They awaken the soul. And the soul is inconvenient. So they drug it. In our world, we don't use soma, but we use its equivalents. Antidepressants that numb, entertainment that anesthetizes, food that sedates, spirituality stripped of discipline, sex without intimacy, community without accountability. We want the feeling of healing, not the cost of it. And beneath all this, a spiritual poverty so vast it feels like air. We no longer believe in transcendence, we believe in pleasure. We no longer aspire to wisdom, we aspire to virality. We no longer seek truth, we seek what feels good, what confirms our bias, flatters our ego, sustains our numbness. And the cost? Empathy becomes performative. Relationships become transactional. Identity becomes curated. And life becomes a spectacle watched, not lived. You may think this is hyperbole. It's not. Look closer. We are witnessing the rise of what philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls the burnout society. A world where people are exhausted not from labor, but from the constant pressure to experience, optimize, enjoy. Where even rest becomes a task. Where even sadness must be productive. And the irony? In chasing pleasure, we've made ourselves miserable. Because pleasure without meaning is like sugar without nutrition. It satiates nothing, it leaves you emptier than before. So here is the real horror. We have been conditioned to love our chains, to defend them, to vote for them, to call them self-care, empowerment, freedom. But chains they remain. They silence the longing for more. Not more pleasure, just truth, more depth, more being. And somewhere deep inside you know this. Because late at night, after the distractions end, after the pleasure wears off, after the world stops pretending, you feel it. The ache. The quiet whisper that says, this isn't it. And that whisper is the beginning of something dangerous, something radical. Rebellion. But to rebel, you must first unlearn the addiction. You must go where the world tells you never to go. Into discomfort, into silence, into yourself. The time for sedation is over. The cost is too high. The cage is too comfortable. And comfort in excess is death, so you feel it now. The artificial sweetness of pleasure has turned bitter on your tongue. The thrill is gone. The laughter fades too fast. The hides can't hide the hollowness. You've seen the matrix, not of machines and metal, but of marketing, mimicry, and mental manipulation. And the most unsettling realization? You built most of it yourself. With every like, every swipe, every escape, every moment you chose numbness over truth. But now you're awake, and here begins the rebellion. Not the kind with banners and blood, but something quieter, far more dangerous, the rebellion of consciousness. Because when you stop needing the machine begins to tremble. But let's be honest, breaking free isn't about deleting your apps or fasting from pleasure. That's just the surface. Real freedom begins in the mind, and the mind is a battlefield littered with decades of conditioning. You must begin with unlearning. Unlearn the lie that pain is failure. Pain is feedback. Pain is real. Pain is a signal that something inside you still wants to live, to move, to grow. To feel pain deeply is to still be connected to life, and to suffer consciously is to reawaken the soul. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." Our ancestors did not build civilizations on the avoidance of pain. They built them through endurance, through meaning, through sacrifice. What have we built? Comfortable cages. If you want out, you must do what this age fears the most. Feel fully. Let grief enter like a storm. Let silence stretch like an ocean. Let boredom bore holes into your psyche until something raw and real emerges from the cracks. Because beneath your need for pleasure lies a deeper hunger, to be whole. You were not born to be entertained. You were born to remember, to awaken the forgotten parts of yourself that this culture has buried in likes and lust. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But who you are cannot be curated. It must be excavated." And excavation begins in darkness. There is a strange and beautiful alchemy in stillness. The moment you stop running from pain, from silence, from self, is the moment the rebellion begins, not outwardly, but inwardly. Sit still. Really, just sit. No music, no scrolling, no stimulation, just you and whatever rises from the silence. At first it will feel like death. But then, if you stay long enough, it will start to feel like truth. You'll see the anxieties that aren't really yours, the desires planted by others, the scripts you've followed without question. You'll see the pleasure you've used as a shield against becoming fully alive. And then you'll choose. Because freedom isn't a gift. It's a decision. A commitment to live in truth, even when truth burns. Look to those who walked this path before. Viktor Frankl, who found purpose in Auschwitz, told us that meaning, not pleasure, is the cornerstone of existence. Aldous Huxley, who saw our future in a drugged and docile humanity, later turned to mysticism and silence to seek what the modern world had buried. Soren Kierkegaard, who suffered deeply and chose faith in despair, reminded us that the leap into the unknown is the only true act of selfhood. They didn't escape the suffering. They embraced it, transformed it. So how do you begin? With small, sacred acts of rebellion. Wake up without reaching for your phone. Read something old, something difficult. Sit in silence and let it haunt you. Walk without purpose. Write without posting. Scream without audience. Fast, not to punish the body but to sharpen the soul. Say no to what flatters your ego but dulls your spirit. And most importantly, risk discomfort. Every meaningful thing, love, creation, transformation, demands discomfort. It demands that you lose something, safety, certainty, self-immusion. But what you gain in return is not just authenticity. You gain yourself. And this is what the pleasure-obsessed world fears the most. A human who feels deeply, who thinks independently, who chooses meaning over escape, who cannot be bought, sold, seduced, or silenced. Because such a person becomes dangerous. Not in the violent sense, but in the existential sense. Dangerous to illusion. Dangerous to manipulation. Dangerous to systems built on your silence. And this rebellion is not just for you. When you break the cycle, you become a mirror. Others see their own chains more clearly. Your courage gives language to their discomfort. Your presence becomes a reminder of what they've lost in their pursuit of more. Because rebellion is contagious, and awakening is viral in the most beautiful way. But beware, this path is not glamorous. There are no trophies, no applause, no dopamine highs. You just quiet power, deep roots, and a life that no longer depends on the next fix to feel worth living. You'll lose friends. You'll lose illusions. You'll lose versions of yourself that were built to please, not to be. But in losing them, you'll gain something terrifyingly rare. Inner sovereignty. Not the kind sold in self-help slogans, the real kind. The kind that can sit in a room alone, stripped of all pleasure, and still say, "I am enough." The system can't sell that, because it can't own that. So the next time you feel the pull, the craving to scroll, to numb, to distract, pause. Ask, what am I running from? And what might I become if I finally stopped? Because this is not just about rebellion. It's about resurrection. And resurrection always begins in the graveyard of false pleasure. Imagine this. You've burned the scripts. The ones that told you who to be, what to want, what to chase. The noise has quieted, the hunger has shifted. You no longer reach for the next high to feel alive. You sit in the quiet, and something in you whispers, "This is it." Not this moment, not this feeling, but this being. And here, beyond the distractions, beyond the curated pleasure, beyond the games, you remember what was always true. You were never looking for pleasure. You were looking for yourself. Pleasure was just the mask. Because behind every craving for stimulation was a deeper cry for connection. Behind every addiction to comfort was a longing for depth. Behind every scroll, every binge, every hit was a question you were too afraid to ask. Am I enough, as I am, without any of it? And now finally the answer rises, not as a thought but as a knowing. Yes, not because you've fixed yourself, not because you've become enlightened, not because you've rejected the world, but because you've returned. Returned to the core, the seed, the quiet flame of being that was never lost, just hidden beneath layers of performance, consumption, and self-forgetting. You see now, pleasure was never the problem. Detachment was. We chained ourselves to pleasure, worshipped it, feared its absence, mistook it for purpose. But pleasure, in its purest form, is innocent. A sunset, a kiss, a moment of laughter, these are sacred. But they were never meant to be the foundation, only the flowering. And flowers don't grow from distraction. They grow from soil, from stillness, from decay and darkness, from roots that go unseen. You had to go down to come up. That's the paradox. The path to freedom was never up and out, it was down and in. Not transcendence, but immanence. Not escape, but embodiment. You do not need to float above your suffering. You need to enter it, embrace it, let it carve you open. Because this is the truth modernity has buried beneath mountains of pleasure. There is beauty in brokenness. There is holiness in hunger. There is clarity in discomfort. There is you, the you that emerges when everything false falls away. You remember now what the mystics and sages have always known. That bliss without awareness is bondage. That silence is not empty, it is full. That real joy is not the opposite of pain, it is birthed from it. That love is not a pleasure, it is a surrender. You realize that the ancient path wasn't about reaching heaven, but returning to presence. Aldous Huxley, in his final days, turned not to more words or theories, but to silence, to sacred experience, to the immediacy of being. He knew, as we must know now, the world doesn't need more pleasure. It needs more presence. And from presence, everything else flows, meaning, creativity, connection, love. Because you are no longer outsourcing your aliveness. You are no longer dependent on systems that sedate, ideologies that distract, technologies that train you to abandon yourself. You have become the source. Not in arrogance, but in humility. Not in isolation, but in integration. You have become the source because you've reconnected to the one truth the pleasure machiner can never commodify. That being is enough. From here, life changes. Not in fireworks, but in foundations. You begin to choose simplicity over stimulation, depth over distraction, stillness over speed. You no longer chase the next hit, you meet what is here. You listen differently. You speak less, but with more weight. You love not to be loved, but because love is what remains when the masks fall. You are no longer in the performance. You are in the presence. And now, perhaps for the first time, you can look at the world not with cynicism, but with compassion. You see the addiction, the numbness, the hunger, and instead of judging, you soften. Because you've been there. You know what it means to be asleep with your eyes open. You know what it means to call chains freedom. You know what it means to confuse comfort for purpose. And you also know the way out. Not through war, but through awakening. Not through revolution, but through return. Return to being. Return to breath. Return to truth. So let this be your final revelation. do not need more pleasure. You need more reality. And reality, when fully embraced, is more beautiful than any illusion. The mountains, the grief, the silence, the laughter, the ache of longing, the stillness after the storm, the unfiltered you, these are not obstacles to happiness, they are the raw material of it. You were never meant to be high all the time. You were meant to be here, alive, aware, awake. And in this radical presence, you rediscover the sacredness of ordinary things. The way the wind moves through leaves. The way your chest rises with breath. The way a single moment can feel like eternity when you stop trying to escape it. This is freedom. Not the freedom to choose endless pleasure. The freedom to choose truth. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because in that hurt is the seed of something ancient. A life that is no longer lived by default, but by design. Not a design imposed by others, but one whispered by your own soul. You are not here to be entertained. You are here to remember, to awaken, to become. And now you have. Welcome back.